Picture this. You've got a house, a job, a routine. You've got two little girls who go to sleep in the same bedroom every night. You've got neighbors who wave at you from across the street, and a life that, by any reasonable measure, looks completely fine. And then one day you make a decision that most people, most moms especially, would never even let themselves seriously consider. Not a vacation, not a sabbatical, a total irreversible dismantling of the entire life you built. That's exactly what Heather Jobson did. And the more you learn about why she did it, the harder it becomes to argue she was wrong. This is the story of raising Voyagers, a family from small-town Ohio who walked away from everything familiar and wound up in a crumbling 200-year-old stone house in the Italian Alps. Hammers in hand, kids running wild in the mountain air, building something that no suburb could ever offer them. But before we get to Italy, we have to go back to where it all started and understand what Heather was really running toward. Heather grew up in Ohio, not the glamorous part of a story, a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the days have a rhythm that rarely changes, and the years have a way of blurring together. She wasn't unhappy, but there was this thing that lived in the back of her mind, this persistent, quiet dream of seeing the world that she'd been carrying since she was young. The problem was, she never really believed it was going to happen. Travel, for her, was something other people did. People from different families, with different bank accounts, different lives. She figured the dream would stay exactly where most dreams end up, filed away somewhere between someday and never. Then she met Brady. Their first date, they ended up talking for hours. Not about movies or restaurants or the weather. About travel, about this shared hunger to get out there and actually see what the planet looked like up close. Heather described it later as the moment she realized Brady wasn't the kind of person who lets dreams stay dreams. If he wanted something, he figured out how to make it happen. That quality, she said, was exactly what she fell in love with. But even after they married, and even after their daughter Alexa came along, the travel life was still something they were circling, not diving into. They took trips here and there. They tested the waters. They told themselves they were building towards something. The truth is they were still doing what most people do, waiting for a sign that it was safe to go. That sign never came. They had to make their own. By 2020, Brady and Heather Jobson were living what most people would call a normal life. Suburban Ohio. 2 kids, Alexa and her younger sister Chloe. A predictable routine. And underneath all of it, a frustration that had been building for years without a name. The Epoch Times described it plainly when covering their story. They were frustrated by the pace of life in the United States. That phrase sounds simple, but unpack it, and it's a whole indictment of a way of living. The alarm clocks, the commutes, the weekends that evaporate before you've done anything with them. The feeling that you're always working towards something that keeps moving further away. 2 kids growing up fast, and a nagging question, is this really how we want to spend these years? Heather has been open about the fact that she and Brady weren't chasing anything reckless. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a breakdown. It was more like a slow, honest reckoning. They'd already started documenting their travel trips on YouTube in 2019 under the name Raising Voyagers. Brady's video production background made that natural, and the response from people watching told them something important. People weren't just entertained, they were hungry for it. Vicariously living through this Ohio family who was daring to ask a question most people never ask out loud. What if we actually did it? 2020 changed everything. That year they stopped waiting. They sold most of their belongings and hit the road. With 2 young daughters in tow, no fixed destination, no safety net, and a conviction that whatever came next was going to be better than the version of life they were leaving behind. People thought they were out of their minds. And honestly, who could blame them? Here's what makes Heather's role in this story so striking. Because it's easy to imagine a free-spirited dad who wants to sell everything and travel the world. That character exists in a dozen movies. But a mom? The person whose whole cultural script says stability, routine, consistency. That's what children need. That's what good mothers provide. Heather didn't just go along with this. She was a full partner in it. She was the one planning the adventures, managing the logistics, building the community on social media, keeping the whole operation running. While Brady was behind the camera, Heather was the one making sure every move was thought through, every country was prepared for, every experience was something the girls would actually absorb and carry with them. And there was a real cost to that. Heather has talked honestly about how traveling with kids is hard. Not Instagram filter hard. Actually hard. There are days when nothing goes the way it's supposed to, when the flights are delayed and the accommodations aren't what you hoped and the kids are exhausted and someone is crying and you think, I gave up a house for this. There are moments that test everything. She's never pretended otherwise. But she's also been clear about what she believes. She and Brady made sacrifices to prioritize travel, and they wouldn't trade any of it. They see it as an opportunity to be better parents and better people. Not an escape from responsibility, a different and more demanding version of it. By 2021, they made it official. They quit their jobs completely. Whatever safety net was left, they cut it. The YouTube video announcing it was direct. We quit our jobs to travel, and it said everything about where they were mentally. There was no going back. This was the life now. What happened next surprised even them. Most families do one big international trip and talk about it for years. Brady and Heather Jobson took their daughters to over 40 countries. 40, with kids. Tree houses in Costa Rica, the markets of Turkey, the temples and streets of Thailand, Greece, the Philippines. They were moving through the world at a pace that would exhaust most adults traveling alone, let alone a family of 4 managing school-age children, filming content, editing videos, managing an audience, and handling every logistical curveball that international travel with young kids will inevitably throw at you. And the girls weren't just along for the ride. Alexa, the eldest, was surfing and volcano climbing and developing the kind of curiosity about the world that doesn't come from a textbook. Chloe was younger, still at the age where she'd get just as excited picking wildflowers in a foreign field as seeing a famous landmark. But both of them were growing up inside something that most children will never experience: the constant, lived understanding that the world is enormous and varied and full of people worth knowing. Heather's parenting philosophy behind this is something she's talked about openly. The goal was never just travel for travel's sake. The bigger mission was to raise Alexa and Chloe into adults who are brave, compassionate, and genuinely understand how big and beautiful the world is. To raise them with the ability to walk into any room in any country and recognize the value of whoever was in it. Meanwhile, the YouTube channel was growing. The audience that had started watching this Ohio family out of curiosity was now genuinely invested. 9 million views. People from all over the world tuning in, watching Brady's polished video production and Heather's relatable, grounded presence, and thinking, could we do that? Should we? But the constant motion was never the end goal. There was a next chapter coming, and it was stranger and more ambitious than anything that came before. At some point, even the most committed nomads want a home base, not because the travel stops being meaningful, but because there's something about roots that matters too. Heather understood that. The question was, what kind of roots and where? The answer turned out to be a 200-year-old stone house sitting in the foothills of the Italian Alps, about 4 acres of land, completely dilapidated. The kind of property where you walk through the door and your first thought probably involves the word condemned rather than home. They bought it. Of course they did. The property sits in a small Italian mountain town below the peaks, where clouds roll through the valleys, and the views are the kind that make grown adults tear up without warning. Heather has described the moment they first arrived at the property, seeing it for real rather than in photos, as overwhelming in the best possible way. The pictures didn't do it justice. The video doesn't either, she said. You have to stand there and feel the air and understand that this is actually happening. What they were taking on was enormous. A completely DIY renovation of a structure that was never designed to house a modern family, let alone 4 people living and working and filming full-time. No professional contractors. Just Brady and Heather, their daughters, and the kind of determination that comes from having already proven to themselves they could figure out things that seemed impossible. The renovation has been ongoing since they moved in. Stone walls, new construction, cutting holes in roofs, building from basically nothing. They've documented every phase of it on YouTube, every setback, every win, every project that goes sideways and has to be reimagined. It's become its own kind of content that audiences are just as gripped by as the travel videos. Watching a family gut and rebuild a centuries-old alpine structure week by week with their own hands is the kind of thing that keeps people coming back. And through all of it, Heather is still the one holding the whole thing together. It's easy to watch a family like the Jobsons and think it all looks effortless. The light through the Alps, the kids playing in the mountains, the gorgeous stone walls slowly coming back to life. But there's a version of this story that nobody talks about enough. The grinding, unglamorous reality of building a life that doesn't come with instructions. Heather has been honest about the stress. She's talked about how she and Brady have to be intentional about carving out time for themselves, even just an hour here and there when the kids are outside, because the renovation and the content creation and the family management are all happening at once, all the time. The boundary between work and life doesn't really exist when your home is your content and your kids are your story. There's also the financial picture, which is more nuanced than it looks. The Jobsons have built an estimated net worth of around $317,000, which for a family that walked away from conventional employment years ago and built everything from scratch through a YouTube channel and digital products is genuinely impressive. Their monthly YouTube revenue alone is estimated anywhere between $2,700 and $8,000 depending on viewership, which fluctuates. Add to that Patreon supporters, brand partnerships with sponsors like AG1 and others, affiliate commissions, and the travel hacking masterclass course they sell, and you have a real functioning business. But it's not a windfall. It's not passive. Every number in that estimate was earned through years of consistency, through filming when they didn't feel like filming, through showing up for their audience even when the renovation hit walls, literally and figuratively. Brady handles the filming and editing, leveraging the video production background he's had since before any of this started. Heather manages the blog, the social channels, the community interaction, and most of the planning that keeps the family and the channel moving forward. They've divided the labor in a way that plays to their strengths, but there's no department they can outsource the hard parts to. This is what Heather signed up for when she made the decision. Not just the beautiful views, all of it. There's a specific kind of criticism that gets leveled at families like the Jobsons, and it's worth taking seriously for a second before dismantling it. The argument goes something like this. Children need stability. They need a community, friends they grow up with, a school with familiar teachers, a bedroom they've had since they were small. Uprooting them, dragging them across 40 countries, raising them in a construction zone in the Italian Alps. How is that responsible? How is that not just the parents living out their own dream at the expense of the kids? It's a real question. But look at what Alexa and Chloe have actually become inside this life. Alexa, the older daughter, wants to be an astronaut, not because someone told her space was interesting, but because she grew up watching the world from unusual angles, from tree houses in the jungle and mountaintops and coastlines of countries most adults will never see. She grew up understanding that boundaries are invented and the sky is not a ceiling. The curiosity she has about the universe is a direct product of the curiosity her parents built into her life from the beginning. Chloe, the younger one, has an instinctive comfort with animals, with nature, with exploring unfamiliar things without fear. She grew up in a world that kept changing, which means she never learned to be afraid of change. That's not nothing. That's a foundational piece of character that will serve her for the rest of her life. Heather and Brady have been explicit about what they believe travel does for children. In a piece with London Mums magazine, they describe their mission as raising their daughters to be brave, unafraid to step outside their comfort zones, and capable of recognizing that people who look or sound different from them are worth learning from. They said they hope their girls will see the beauty of the world and understand that even differences teach you who you are. The critics can keep the same bedroom and the neighborhood routine. The Jobson girls got something else. As of 2025, the Jobson family is still in Italy, still building. The stone house that looked like a ruin when they bought it is slowly becoming something you'd recognize as a home. Walls going up, new spaces taking shape, the renovation that started as a YouTube series turning into a real, permanent place where this family can finally exhale. The channel keeps moving. New episodes, new phases of the build, Patreon supporters getting behind-the-scenes access, early previews, video calls with Heather and Brady. The audience that followed them through 40 countries is now following them through the hardest project they've ever taken on, and they're just as invested. Brady is still behind the camera. Heather is still the one making sure everything works. The girls are growing up in the Alps, bilingual, fearless, with a relationship to the world that most adults spend their whole lives trying to build. And here's what's worth sitting with at the end of all this. Heather Jobson made a decision in 2020 that the conventional parenting script says you're not supposed to make. She didn't give her daughters the same bedroom every night. She didn't give them the same school, the same neighborhood, the same predictable rhythms. She gave them something that's a lot harder to measure and a lot more difficult to explain. An unshakable sense that the world is theirs to move through, that being uncomfortable is survivable, that the life worth living is the one you actually build rather than the one that gets handed to you. There are parents who read that and feel defensive, parents who did exactly what the script said and love their kids just as fiercely. This isn't a condemnation of the conventional life. Most people live it for good reasons. But there's a question underneath this story that doesn't have an easy answer. What do we actually owe our children? Safety or possibility? The predictable or the extraordinary? The life that looks right from the outside or the one that actually fits? Heather Jobson decided. She didn't wait for someone to tell her it was okay. And her daughters are growing up in the Italian Alps, building something out of old stone, dreaming about space, unafraid of the world. Hard to argue with that,